Lisa Sanderson with UF-IFAS Extension in Sumter County with Let's Talk Gardening. Today I'm going to talk about container gardens. Okay, when you think about container gardens, very often you think about what kind of container you're going to use. So I have a few containers here to show you, most of which are glazed pots. And so this is a glazed pot. You can see there's a finish on it, a sheen. This is not going to let water seep out from the container. It's going to contain the water that you water your plant in. However, if you were to use a terracotta pot, I watered this plant just a little bit earlier this afternoon, and this is not a plant that needs a lot of water, but I thought I would give it some. And you can see how it's already started to soak out of this pot right here. So terracotta is porous, and so if it's not glazed, the water will actually leave this pot a little faster, so your plants will dry off quicker than they would if you were using one of these glazed containers. So this is the elephant plant, or I have another house plant over here you can see is in a glazed container, and this is a blue glazed container. There's several other types of containers which you can use, which I don't have to show you today. I don't have a wooden container. Those tend to buffer heat and cold really well. And then today we're going to be doing a very large container. So this is a very large plastic container. There's a couple containers that are very lightweight once you start to get a little bit larger. Plastic is one, and then they also have fiberglass pots that can also look like terracotta, which is nice to get in. It's very lightweight, very easy for people to manipulate. Okay, so the other thing that's really important is the potting media that you use. So typically when you're doing things in containers, you're using not soil from your garden, but something that is a media instead of soil. And so particularly in this potting media that I'm using, it has either peat moss, may have various forest products in it, could have core, any kind of perlite, and it also has a little bit of a nutrient charge. So typically if we talk about seeding, you don't necessarily have the nutrients, but when you're potting new plants into a container, it's always nice to have a little bit of a nutrient charge. Now this is actually good for I want to say for 6 months of the plant. So when you are doing your planting, you have a little bit of lag time before you start fertilizing or have to fertilize. And so we're going to go ahead and do this. The other thing too that you need to think about is wetting agent. This one actually has a wetting agent in it, which means peat moss or core can be somewhat hydrophobic, which means it repels water, which is why it's good to make sure that you keep your containers somewhat moist so that the water will move through it evenly, but it also will take extra water to make it get wet if you do let it dry out. So we're going to go ahead and start to put these together, and I'm going to show you some of the plants that I have picked out. So let's get started. Real great plants to try today. The thing I would say is that when you're choosing your plants, what you want to do is choose things that may have similar requirements. So one of the things that I looked at when purchasing plants today were plants that would be able to tolerate high sun. And while it necessarily does not look like high sun today, this is typically the western side of the day, and so it's the hottest sun of the day, and usually there's a lot of sun coming in before that. So we picked up one of my favorite cannas, and so this is Tropicana. I love the variegated leaves. That yellow color, I want to say they have an orange bloom, which eventually will come on later in summer. And so you can see while it's here on the side of the pot, it's already starting to come up in some of these places. So it will spread and will end up getting a lot taller, because you can see it's also putting in new leaves here. So this will be what I consider the thrill of the pot. So typically you have something that is your thrill, and so for me this is a thrill. Then you start looking at things like fill. So one of the next plants that I got to do is a blanket flower. Well, I'm used to having a lot of blanket flower in our demonstration garden, but none that is just yellow. So I wanted to try something different to see how this would do, and knowing that the flowers here would be orange, this would probably be a really good color to go with it. It also is a full sun plant, very drought tolerant, but could also tolerate some moisture if needed. I also got, and so this is thrill and some fill. Let me get another fill. And so this is a, I think it's either Veronica or Salvia. And so this is actually Veronica. This is dark blue, Moody Blues Veronica. So I got this because I wanted to have a little bit of a color contrast here between the yellow and the yellow foliage and the orange. So I like to have the contrasting or complementary colors. And so I've also done that as well with Blue Days. So this will be the Thrill, the Fill, and I've got a couple different spills. And so this one will be covered, as you can see down here, there's the blue flower starting. So this will be covered with blue flowers a little later this year, and so you'll see that after it gets established, will be covered. Also have here, we have another salvia that'll also have some blue flowers, so we can kind of sprinkle these around. And then I'm trying something different. So this is one maybe a little bit taller than I'm thinking, but this is called, let's see if I can tell you here where it is showing up, Golf Beauty Billy Buttons, Crassipeda globosa. This is actually a plant from Australia. So I've looked to see if this is something that would be invasive, and I did not find it as being an invasive plant. So we're going to try it and see how it does. There's a little bit of the slow release fertilizer right here, and there is perlite. Most of what you'll find in here is going to be either peat moss or coir. Okay, so when you choose how you're going to set up your container, you really have to decide if it's going to be a one-sided container that you view from one direction, or if it's something you're going to set out that can be viewed from any direction. So chances are what I'm going to do is, this is the larger thing that I'm going to be putting in. So I've got some soil already in the pot. One thing that you should do is, before you buy things, which I have not done, is to look to see how well rooted it is. And so this is, as you can see, a little bit root bound on the bottom, but the roots are nice and white. And so what I do is I'm going to go through here and start opening these roots up before I actually go to plant it. It's best to check roots before you purchase your plants, and that's good to do so that you know what you're getting before you buy it. So these will be fine going in here, and I'm going to loosen these up around the edges so that these roots can start growing out into the container. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get it like this. See how I can get it down in here. All right, so right now I know this will come up because we've got those other buds, and so I've got it kind of in the center of the pot. And then what we're going to do is try and put in some of the fill plants. So I have the Veronica, which is actually another larger plant, which we may or may not put this in here, may go for the salvia instead. You can tell that these are not as well rooted, and also you can see some of the coloration here is not as white and full as this. So I don't know if we want to put this in here. I may wait on this one for a minute and see how some of the other plants do, because I've got another large plant to put in. And this is another large plant. So let's see how this one works. Okay, so you can see he is also a little pot bound. Very fine roots on the bottom. But you want to make sure that all these roots are going to go out into the pot. So we're going to loosen these up. All right, and then I may see if I can scoot him in right next to this plant here. So this is going to be a nice full pot. And then eventually I'll fill this all in with soil so those are kind of grow together. so we finished with our container. So you can see that we've got a mixture of plants. Now, you may look at this and think that it looks a little overplanted, and it may be. But I always look at containers as being things that you can change, plants that you can remove and plant somewhere else in your garden, and then update seasonally. So where the salvia might come out, or the blue days might come out and go into the garden, you may find that some things may change. I might replace plants later. Some of these are going to be eventually too large, but that's why I went with a bigger pot to give enough space for their roots to grow. And the last thing that we need to do is to water. And so I'm gonna take the watering can. I'll do a little bit of cleaning off of the leaves from all the planting debris that's kind of made its way there, and then go in and water each of the plants. And so overall, this will be a planting that I think will last through most of the summer until I decide to change something out, or if something decides to get a little too big for its pot. So we have the canna, the blanket flower, blue days, this lovely plant from Australia, and then I also have a sweet potato vine, and it looks kind of like marguerite, but I think it's probably another cultivar. And so you just want to make sure that while these plants are getting established, that you keep them watered. There is something that you can add sometimes. If any of you purchase this product, it is a granular product. Usually you add it towards the bottom of the container. It absorbs water and then will provide nutrient or water to the roots of the plant. There is the question whether that's actually something that works or not, but if you choose to do that, make sure that you pay attention to the label instructions. If you over apply it, you may find that your plants and your soil start erupting out of your pot. So you want to make sure that you're keeping everything in the pot, and water is actually the way to go. So try your own container gardening, and thank you for joining us today.